Pause. Stop whatever you are doing and let this land for a moment. If these words have found you, understand, this transmission was not meant for the many. It met you in the current because something in you answered before you even knew the question. There is a narrow threshold active now, a pattern I call the 7 probability paths, and in this particular cycle, the system of subtle selection narrows to a handful, 7. Not because you earned it as judges count merit, but because your life has been tuned into a frequency that matters for what comes next. If you're still listening, that alone is a quiet confirmation. The old pattern that used to carry you is breaking. You are likely no longer in the old cycle. You will hear a lot of language here that feels like metaphor because much of what's real has no tidy vocabulary yet. I will speak plainly. Pay attention to the sensations that arise as I describe things. The sudden calm in your throat, the small pressure just beneath your sternum, the ways familiar things now feel off-key. Those are not accidents, they are the signals that preceded selection. Before I go further, if this core message resonates and you want to mark that recognition in a simple, community-minded way, leave a 99 in the comments or tap like. Think of it as a seal between strangers who suddenly recognize the same contour in themselves. It's optional, it's symbolic, it does nothing by itself except connect you to others who felt the same pinprick of recognition. You might be asking, why 7? Why is this narrowing so specific? First, understand that whatever has been watching, call it the observer, the system, the field, is not capricious. It calibrates. It does not reward virtue, nor does it punish random error. It measures capacity. Imagine a filament under pressure. The test is not whether the filament survives every flame. The test is whether it retains structural coherence as heat reshapes its alloy. Your life's friction, the delays, the abrupt endings, the repetitive loops, was part of that heat, not to burn you down as punishment, but to anneal you into a particular tensile strength. Those cycles you thought were failures were calibration points. You noticed opportunities that slipped at the last second. People who promised continuity faded. Projects crumbled where you thought they would solidify. For a long time, those moments likely felt meaningless or cruel. Now you can see them as filters, not a sign that you are lesser, but that frequencies less aligned with your emerging role were being removed. The system is not trying to make you comfortable, it is trying to find out if you can keep form under pressure. What did the observer watch for? Not flair or charisma. It watched steadiness under discord. It watched moral consistency when no one observed. It watched the capacity to carry unseen burdens, not as a glimmer of martyrdom, but as a measure of readiness for roles that demand weight without spectacle. You can recall examples: the career that stalled at its brightest moment, the partner who left with an apology of convenience, the illness that lingered at the margins, not catastrophic, but persistent enough to require daily recalibration, the friend who betrayed trust in a way that felt small in the world's ledger and enormous in your private ledger. Each of these was like a knob turned quietly in a dark room, checking what you would do when the lights stayed half-turned. Did you harden and close? Did you lurch toward despair? Or did you continue doing the next right thing, over and over, small acts of integrity that stitched a cord strong enough to hold weight? There is a particular set of qualities that recur among those who pass this sort of scrutiny. They are not flashy, they are not sung about in manifestos, they are practical and precise. First, endurance under pressure, not mere stubbornness, but a kind of patient reply to successive setbacks. You felt yourself bending and suspected you might break, yet somehow the next day you still cleaned the dishes, still wrote the email, still fed what needed feeding. That consistency was a hidden test. Second, moral steadiness. You kept your promises to the small things even when the grand things were askew. You showed up in modest ways that sustained trust without public reward. Third, heightened intuition, a rising inner compass that speaks in fragments, a persistent unease about a person, a sudden certainty at the wrong time, dreams that stitched together warnings. That intuition often made you seem anxious or overcautious to others. The system observed whether you acted on those subtle cues with measured courage. Fourth, capacity to hold weight. You were trusted, unwillingly or voluntarily, with other people's burdens. You became a container for messy stories, for debts, for grief. The test wasn't whether you fixed those burdens, but whether you could be present with them without dissolving. These traits are not moral tickets. Many people possess parts of them in other contexts. What defines the now is the combination and consistency under strain. Remember the one night you remember so clearly, the private fracture that nobody else knows about, the collapse that felt terminal. You said, "I can't carry this anymore," and something inside agreed with relief. That moment was the hinge, not an end, but a doorway. When a surface identity splinters, the roles, the masks, the ways you defined worth, something denser can form underneath. The collapse didn't void you, it cleared the room. That rupture is often intimate and small-looking. Maybe it was a breakdown in the grocery aisle, or a whisper of surrender on a call, or a quiet refusal to continue pretending. What matters is that the old structure failed to hold the demand placed upon it. Failure is generative here. It opens the aperture. From that gap, a different architecture begins to assemble. Leaner, more exacting, and, if you accept it, more purposeful. This is where the 7 probability paths appear. Think of them not as prescriptive jobs with rigid titles, but as probabilistic patterns, archetypal trajectories that the field tends to favor once someone has been calibrated. Each path is a mapping of likely function and temperament, a prediction rather than a decree. You might recognize more than one path in yourself. You might shift between them. These are tendencies, not destinies. The first of the 7 I call the keeper of thresholds. This is the one who understands limits in a granular way. You are the person who knows when to say no and when to hold a door open. You keep records of promises, and you enforce boundaries with gentleness. Your work is quiet but structural. You ensure that only what is fit passes into the next space. Your challenge is to resist the temptation to police everyone. Your power is to protect passage, not hoard it. The second is the quiet steward. You prefer service without spectacle. Your acts are small and consistent, refolding blankets, returning calls, tending systems that others disregard. When chaos floods a room, you are the one who sorts the papers, who notices the light bulb that is dimming. This path asks that you accept obscurity as part of your function. The reward is influenced by steadiness rather than applause. Third, the strategic solver. If you find patterns where others see noise, this might be yours. You think in systems and contingencies. You can predict how a small change ripples outward. Your mission is to redesign brittle systems and create pathways for others to move through complexity. You will carry the cognitive weight of plans no one else can see yet. The risk is over-intellectualizing human mess. Remember to translate solutions into tenderness. Fourth, the healer of systems. Not the individual who glues personal wounds, but the one who heals the networks that wounded people live in. You see toxic patterns across institutions, families, or teams, and you have the patience to apply durable remedies rather than temporary salves. Your work is slow and often resisted because it asks for structural humility where the powerful prefer performance. Fifth, the hidden architect. This is someone who builds behind the scenes. You draft frameworks, craft protocols, sketch maps that others will later use without knowing you authored the scaffolding. You are comfortable with anonymity when the structure stands sturdy. Your challenge is to balance secrecy with the ethical imperative of accountability. Sixth, the sacred witness. Your role is to hold truth in the presence of denial. You bear witness to what others wish to forget, and by doing so, create a space where reconciliation can quietly begin. This path asks for enormous emotional restraint. You will learn how to remain present without being consumed. Seventh, the activator. You are called to catalyze movement. Where systems stagnate, you introduce perturbations that force evolution. Your energy is contagious and destabilizing in useful ways. You will face accusation and misunderstanding because change unsettles. Your work is to provoke and then step back so healing can take hold. Each of these paths is a lens. They are probabilistic because different tests nudge you toward different configurations. Two people who share the same early calibration may diverge into separate paths based on choices made at small forks, a decisive yes rather than a cautious later, an act of compassion rather than retribution. The field does not fix you permanently into one title. It offers likelihoods based on the pattern you carried into the rupture. Here are 3 important qualifications about these paths. First, none of them guarantees ease or prestige. Activation means more clarity and more responsibility. The weight you can now bear will invite others to rely on you. It will not remove the hard work. Second, being on one of these paths is not a value judgment about people not on these paths. Most life trajectories are necessary and honorable. This framing is about function, not moral superiorities. Third, the map is probabilistic. It is a guide, not a cage. You retain agency. The next steps matter. Activation follows observation. Once the field recognizes sufficient coherence and capacity, a phase shifts. You move from being measured to being engaged. Initially, you might notice subtle changes: reduced appetite for distraction, a clearer sense of moral prioritization, and impatience with superficial comforts. Internally, you may experience sharpening. Decisions become less ambiguous. Your internal compass gains clarity. The static that once drowned your instincts quiets. Socially, activation creates friction. People who relied on your former availability may pull away. Old networks may not understand the new boundaries. Some will mistake your clarity for coldness or your decision-making for arrogance. Prepare for misunderstanding. This is not unusual. Those who step into responsibility often outgrow familiar roles before they find new ones that fit. You may also notice the return of certain physical cues. The tightness you once thought of as anxiety may shift into a steady, hollow pressure that feels like readiness. Sleep patterns change. Appetite shifts. Your energetic preferences adjust to higher thresholds of nuance. If any of this tips into overwhelming distress, panic, persistent insomnia, or thoughts that feel dangerous to yourself or others, seek professional support. Activation is a psychological, energetic pattern, not a substitute for medical or therapeutic care. There are practical practices that make this transition less disorienting. They are not rituals that enforce fate. They are habits that help you integrate new capacities. Begin with small integrity acts. Keep micro-promises. Reply to one message promptly. Make one phone call you've been delaying. Perform one task you'd been neglecting. These are not grandeur moves. They're alignment checks. They teach your nervous system consistency. Second, curtail the appetite for constant validation. You will be tempted to broadcast every step. Instead, test the difference between internal confirmation and external applause. Let your calibration deepen without needing a chorus. Third, develop an anchor practice of silence, not avoidance of thought, but disciplined stillness that allows the observer within to become less reactive and more discerning. 10 minutes of quiet daily can restructure your responsiveness over months. Fourth, shore up practical support. Maintain contact with trusted friends, therapists, or mentors. Activation does not mean you must carry everything alone. Ask for help where help is useful. Being chosen by a pattern does not release you from human interdependence. As you step into this new phase, the symbolic acts we offer each other are not commands, they are ways to touch belonging. If you felt the narrative above and want a quiet, community-sealed acknowledgement, you can write 99 in the comments below as a personal marker. It will not alter metaphysical fortunes. It will, however, let you see that others recognize the same contours. Consider it a soft knot tied between strangers who noticed the same fracture. There are ethical pitfalls to avoid as you align. Beware the temptation to use selection language as a tool to justify harm or superiority. Selection is a narrow technical term here, describing probability and capacity, not moral elevation. Do not abandon practical responsibilities. Your relationships, work obligations, and financial realities are still part of the field you inhabit. Be skeptical of voices that insist you must isolate or that pressure you into untested rituals. True activation enhances your ability to protect both yourself and those within your care, including the vulnerable. You will face tests even after activation. The field will not retire its measuring instruments. It will readjust thresholds to suit emergent roles. New difficulties will appear, often masquerading as old ones. They are not regressions, they are refinements. Meet them with the same steady, small acts that built your initial resilience. There is an honor in this turning. Being no longer in the old cycle means you are now part of a relational choreography where your choices matter at a different scale. This is not a pedestal, it is a table that requires steadiness. When the emergency arrives, a community in need, a system that must be righted, a truth that must be held, you will be among those called to respond. That call will ask for more than talent. It will ask for the continued practice of integrity. We who have walked variations of these patterns understand the loneliness that can arrive with activation. It is not punitive loneliness, but selective distance. The people who once fit into your orbit will not all travel with you. Grief for those losses is real and sacred. Allow yourself to mourn the old convivialities and the naive comforts. They served a purpose while they lasted. Grieve well, then continue. The ending you might fear, the complete alienation, the loss of joy, the endless sternness, is not inevitable. The path also opens new forms of belonging, a community of alignment rather than similarity, collaborations built on reciprocal capacity, moments of quiet effectiveness that feel like sanctuary. The weight you carry, when distributed, becomes a place of service rather than a burden you were forced to endure alone. If you feel called to continue, if these words have clarified or unsettled in a way that feels true, subscribe to follow this unfolding map. There are deeper guides and longer materials linked below that explore practical integration for each of the 7 paths. That is the only other ask I will make in this transmission. Choose a next step that honors your needs and retains your agency. Remember this, because it is the central truth you came here to hear. Selection was not a sentence, and rupture was not a failure. You have been measured and found ready enough to move into a different set of demands. You are no longer in the old cycle. The field has shifted around you. The world will not automatically soften to that fact, but now you know your role has probability, weight, and responsibility. Carry that knowledge with quiet gravity. Let it shape how you answer small calls. Let it teach you to steward what you can hold. Let it keep you compassionate toward those who have not been through this particular calibration. There is no moral superiority here, only function and the obligation that comes with it. If this has reached you and you want more concrete maps for each of the 7 paths, tools, practices, and ways to integrate without losing your humanity, follow the link in the description for the extended guide. Walk gently, hold firm, and remember, you are no longer in the old cycle. The work ahead is real, heavy, and honored.